Hello and welcome to the Psych Leadership Podcast, the show that helps you understand the psychology of growth, leadership, and making big moves in your life and career. As always, my name's Luke Upchurch, and I'm so happy that you took time out of your busy day to hang out with me. Today we're going to be talking about self-advocacy, how to speak up without coming off as pushy or, frankly, like a jerk. So sometimes your brain is screaming that you should say something, but your mouth just doesn't quite cooperate. You kind of freeze on the spot. Maybe it's during a group project when somebody else is taking all the credit. Maybe it's at your part-time job when you're asked to cover a shift again. Maybe it's in your first real job where your manager's feedback doesn't quite seem fair. You want to respond, but you freeze up. Speaking up's hard, right? Especially when you're in a newer role, still trying to find your footing. Keep in mind, folks, that doesn't just apply to high school or college students that are new in role. That's anybody that is in a new position, working with a new team, right? We try to put ourselves out there. We want to prove to our boss, to our new company or what have you. We want to prove to them that they made the right decision, that we stood out from the pack because we are capable and we are competent and that we belong there, right? And sometimes that comes at the expense of accepting too much. We say yes too often. And sometimes we're quiet because we feel like, I haven't cut my teeth enough. Right? I haven't proven myself, so what do I know? I'm just the new guy. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. You don't want to come across rude or arrogant, but staying silent can cost just as much. It keeps you small. And that's where assertiveness theory comes in. It's all about how to communicate confidently without being aggressive, how to stand up for yourself while still showing respect for others. So that's what we're going to get into today. So to start us off, let's think about the definition of assertiveness. So assertiveness isn't about volume, it's about value. It's knowing your worth and your needs and being able to clearly express that worth, those needs. And in psychology, we think about assertiveness as the balance between passivity and aggression. So passive communication says your needs matter more than mine. Aggressive communication says my needs matter more than yours. Assertive communication, on the other hand, says both of our needs matter. And when you're assertive, you're not trying to win, you're simply trying to connect while still holding your ground. Let's talk about self-advocacy in school. For most of us, that's where we get our first big lesson. Obviously, it can come with interactions with, your parents or other authority figures. But for a lot of us, where you really need to apply a little bit more pressure tends to come in the classroom. So maybe you're in college, sitting in class, you don't understand the material, and you could quietly struggle through it. Or you could email your professor and ask for help. But even that can feel intimidating, right? So here's the trick. You want to advocate for yourself by being specific, respectful, and solution-oriented. And again, in this space, you can absolutely email. I'm going to promote the idea of speaking up in person. And I know that's maybe adds another layer of complexity or anxiety to it. So take this as you will, but oftentimes when we communicate in written format, the reader is going to apply their own emotion to your content. So when I say their own emotion, I mean everything from how is their day going today? Did they spill coffee on themselves on the way to work? Did they step in dog crap going to the car? Those kind of things, right? That puts them in a bad state of mind. So now when they read your message, while well-intended, it may come off the wrong way. They may also have a bad taste in their mouth from something that you've done in the past, right? So when you say it in person, you're able to add so much more to the conversation. All right, you're able to add the body language, the emotion to it. So if you're in the headspace that you can do that, and if that isn't overwhelming for you, I'd strongly recommend that. If it has to be in written form, there's still some formatting that we can do to make sure that it comes off the right kind of way. So, for example, whether I say it or write it, I may approach the professor with something to the effect of, hey, I've been reviewing the material on cognitive bias, for example, but I'm having trouble connecting with the examples from the lecture. Could we schedule some time to go over it? That's self-advocacy. It's confident, it's not demanding, and it says I cared enough to ask. Another situation, what about if you're working on, say, a group project and not everybody is pulling their weight or not everybody is following through? So you could stay silent, you could resent it, you could work harder to compensate for the lack of motivation of others, or you can approach it by saying, hey, I know everyone's busy. We really need to divide this up so that we can stay on track. Can we revisit what everyone's doing? That becomes leadership. It's assertive communication that moves things forward without creating more friction. And again, that's another example where I would tell you, if you can say it out loud rather than putting it in writing, there's a completely different tone that can be perceived there, right? Even if I say it out loud, if I come in there hot and heavy, hey, everyone's, I know you guys are busy, but we need to divide this up to stay on track, right? Just the emphasis on the word busy and the connotation in my tone, I come off very sarcastic, very passive aggressive, and it's going to send the wrong message. If I approach it a little different and say, hey guys, I know everyone's busy, but we need to divide this work up so we can stay on track and revisit what everyone's doing. Right there, I sounded very even. And, if I take that to the other extreme, hey guys, I know everyone's busy, but if we could divide this up, we could stay on track, kind of, revisit what everyone's doing. There I sounded like a quiet little church mouse that probably just got ignored, right? I went way, way too passive. So again, that's why I'm going to encourage you, whenever possible, say this stuff out loud. And one of the things that I do, by the way, is actually practice those conversations. And I know this probably sounds crazy to you, but I can't tell you how many times that I've needed to have those types of conversations and to get past my own anxiety, but also to sort of level my own emotions, to reach that balance of emotional intelligence, emotional maturity. Sometimes I'll actually practice the conversations out loud. I say them out loud. I may even say them in front of a mirror, because sometimes the tone that you hear in your head versus your facial expressions and your body language might be basically conveying mixed messages. Right? So you want to make sure that everything is copacetic, that everything is matching up, and that you're saying what you mean, and that the message being conveyed is what was intended, right? Because there can definitely be some differences there. So now let's talk some other examples. Let's talk about folks that are early in career or in their first real job. Okay. When I say real job, I mean, and no disrespect to somebody that's working, say, in fast food, but I'm talking about a job that you're going to brag to your friends about. Right. And if that is in fast food or retail or something like that, then more power to you. I don't mean any disrespect for that. But when I talk about a first real job, most people think about that as something I went to college for, or I've trained for, or, puts me where I want to be in terms of my long-term goals. Okay. So don't read too much into that terminology there. But in this space, the stakes feel a little bit higher, and you're struggling with things like power dynamics, office politics, performance reviews, and professional norms and culture in that place of business. So sometimes speaking up in a meeting, you tend to hesitate because you're still wearing the new guy badge, right? You still feel like maybe you're too new to have an opinion. Or if I say that my workload is too much, then I'll seem like I'm incapable. And so the key here is to pair that confidence with context. If you're raising a concern, frame it around shared goals, for example. So you might say something like, if you're struggling with your deadlines or the volume of work, you might approach your boss with a sentiment of, I want to make sure I'm delivering quality work, but with the current deadlines, I'm worried that I won't be able to give my project the best. Could we talk about priorities and make sure that I'm spending my energy where I should be? Right? This says that I am acknowledging that there's a lot to be done and that I don't want to let the team down. It doesn't say that I can't handle it. It just says I want to do things in the appropriate order so that I'm delivering the results in right on time, right? That I'm giving the team what they need when they need it, as opposed to going with the mantra of everything's important, right? I tell my boss this all the time, right? If everything's important, then nothing is important. So we have to level set, we have to prioritize, and be intentional with where we're spending our energy. And that's what that conversation says. And again, it's in the delivery. So if you're not confident that you can deliver it really well, if saying it out loud is a challenge for you, write it as a kind of a last ditch effort. I would still strongly encourage you to build the courage to practice the muscle memory of saying it out loud so that you can absolutely control the narrative and you're not dealing with any other Z variables, right? Those are the variables beyond our control, like, did your boss get screamed at by their spouse this morning, or et cetera, et cetera. You don't want to come off the wrong kind of way. So notice in that it's not about complaining, it's about collaborating. So another example here is when you have a new idea. And this is one that I struggle with. In my day job, I work with a team that most of them have been in IT about as long as I've been working, right? So sometimes I feel like, I guess the best analogy I would use is if any of you have ever had older siblings or hung out with, older friends or cousins or something like that, where you wanted to belong, but you kind of felt out of place. That's how I feel with my team sometimes. And it's not for lack of confidence. It's more, or competence, I should say. It's lack of confidence. It's that I haven't done it nearly as long as them. And sometimes I'm afraid of saying something really dumb. Okay. So the way that we approach this, you might say something like, this might be a new perspective, but have we thought about approaching it this way? Right there, you're signaling confidence and humility, and that's the sweet spot for career advocacy. Another example I would give you, and I use this in my day job a lot, I try to lay down the breadcrumbs to get them to at least understand where my logic comes in, where I'm thinking about this resolution, for example. And so the way that I tend to do that is I might say, hey, let me parrot that back to you. Let me parrot that problem statement. Or what I hear you saying is, and then I basically reiterate or summarize what I believe the problem that we're trying to solve looks like, right? If we can agree on the problem, then I can also ask them questions about the process, right? So here's the problem. Now let me make sure I understand the whole situation. And through that, sometimes I find that the idea I had in my head was completely off base, right? That I didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle. And so I'm really, really glad I didn't jump in right there on that end stage of sharing my idea or my solution, because it would have been unfounded, right? It would not have quite matched the energy of the problem itself. And so by going back, I can confirm this information with them. I can make sure that they understand what I believe I understand. And then that lets me kind of, if my idea still holds water, then I can walk them through that and make sure that we're all in the right space. Right? Now we're collaborating on an idea instead of it just being mine. And frankly, that helps with buy-in anyway. So it's a win-win, right? I spoke up. I wasn't passive. I wasn't cocky either. But we were able to build a solution together. So now let's talk about the psychology behind assertiveness. So we talk about this concept here, assertiveness theory, and it depends on three components. You need these three things for assertiveness theory to really shine. It's awareness of your own needs and emotions, respect for other people's needs and emotions, and the skill to communicate the first two effectively. Right? And that communication is absolutely key. Assertiveness isn't a personality trait, it's a learned behavior, one that you can build over time, one that you can practice over time. So it might start with something small, just like saying no. And typically I tell folks that the statement of a problem or the statement of a negative should not end the sentence, right? So you asked me to cover for that shift. You know what? I really can't tonight, but I can stay late to help tomorrow, or I can come in a little early tomorrow, or whatever that outcome might be. My boss approaches me at Friday at 4 p.m. and says, hey, can you get this done by end of day? Well, I can't. I have plans. I have boundaries, right? So it's okay to let them know that that's the case, but don't end the sentence there. So, no, boss, I can't get that done by end of day today, but I can knock it out or first thing Monday morning or by end of day Monday. And I mean, obviously, be flexible. There are going to be times where there's some business urgency there, but I try to make that the exception and not the rule. Another easy example for you is to discuss opportunities for growth in your role. So, oftentimes, especially as the new person, we tend to say yes to everything. And it doesn't take long before the job that we were hired to do and the compensation that accompanies that doesn't quite match up with the job that we're actually doing and the compensation that we're not getting. Okay. So it's all right to say things like, hey, I would like to discuss opportunities for growth in my role. And then just talk about that perspective. Because in some cases, it could be that your boss is so busy themselves, maybe they don't quite understand the pressure that they're putting on you. That they thought this thing that they asked you to do was a short-term project, and here you've been pulled into 10 meetings a week about it. Right? They might not have that same line of sight. So it's okay to talk with them about those things. I do this often in my role where I'll say something to the effect of, I can absolutely do that. I think I'm struggling a little bit on capacity. Let's talk about prioritization. Right. I used a similar example earlier in our conversation today, but this is framed a little bit different. Right. Just trying to help our leadership understand what is too much without just, quietly resenting it. Okay. All right. So let's close out the conversation with just making sure that we're not being too pushy. So a lot of people, especially those early in their career, they worry that assertiveness is going to come off as arrogant. But research actually shows us the opposite. People who are respectfully assertive are seen as more competent, more trustworthy, more authentic. What people don't respect is silence. They want clarity. Clarity starts with being comfortable owning your perspective. If your heart's in the right place and your tone stays grounded, we go from a place of coming off as pushy to coming off as assertive. And that, my friends, is powerful. All right. So, folks, I'll tell you, self-advocacy is one of the most important skills that you'll learn because it doesn't stop in the office. Advocating for yourself shows how you expect to be treated and how you want others to treat you. So if this episode helped you, share it with a friend who's still finding their voice. And remember that leadership doesn't start when you get a title. It starts when you find the courage to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading with psychology in mind.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the podcast. Thanks so much for your time today. If you like this content, I'm going to ask that you consider a small donation. Every little bit helps, But this allows us to continue not only doing the podcast, but actually offering the internship positions, the leadership conferences, as well as the in-person courses that we deliver to high school and college students. Think about hitting the donation button for me. And again, we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.